Hope you're ready for this video today. Question period is pretty decent. Before we get into it, though, I do want to encourage y'all to hit the like button and subscribe if you haven't yet already. It does really help grow the channel. And without further ado, let's get into today's question period, shall we?
We're dealing with the same old Liberal scandals. The Auditor General has released a report against the Liberal government on the multi-million-dollar ArriveCan debacle. The Liberals gave $64 million to GC Strategies, a two-person IT firm that did no actual work and is currently under RCMP investigation. Wow. Today, this House is considering our Conservative motion to get Canadians their money back within 100 days. Will the Liberals vote to give back the $64 million to Canadians? Yes?
The Honourable Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Mr. Speaker, we will address that question in a moment, but I am devastated to learn of the Air India crash that occurred earlier this morning. The flight was carrying 242 people, one of whom was Canadian. We are in touch with our international partners, and I have been speaking with Canadians this morning. I am sure that all members of this House will join in extending our collective condolences to the families of those who have lost loved ones this morning. Thank you.
So she didn't answer the question well.
The Honourable Member for Haldimand Norfolk.
Mr. Speaker, we also extend condolences to the families. Mr. Speaker, these Liberals should not be dodging accountability. They want to hide their scandals from Canadians, but the Auditor General report is very, very clear. This Liberal government ignored the rules and allowed insiders to profit to the tune of $64 million. Wow. The Liberals have shown a complete disdain for hardworking Canadians by promoting the very same ministers who engaged in the cronyism and corruption. Why should wasteful Liberal politicians get promoted while Canadian taxpayers get a $64 million bill?
The Honourable Minister for Government Transformation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I'd just like to note that we've implemented the measures recommended by the Auditor General in previous reports as well as internal audits. We have revoked the security clearance of GC Strategies. We have terminated all contracts with GC Strategies. We've barred GC Strategies from future contracts with the Government of Canada. We've taken legal action against GC Strategies. We've referred cases to the RCMP because, Mr. Speaker, we will never tolerate misconduct from our suppliers or their subcontractors. Thank you.
The Honourable Member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
The Auditor General released a scathing audit this week on the top ArriveCan contractor, GC Strategies. This two-person company under RCMP investigation received a jaw-dropping $64 million from these Liberals. And the old ministers responsible for this all got promoted by this Prime Minister and are sitting as ministers right there, right now. Wow. Canadians are incensed by these same old Liberal ministers continuing in their corrupt ways. A simple question for their Prime Minister: when are Canadians going to get their money back?
The Honourable Minister
that is absolutely fair.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We will always protect the integrity of our procurement process, which is why we've implemented recommendations from the Auditor General from past reports, such as increased transparency, strengthening oversight, clarifying the roles, the responsibilities across departments. We will always hold bad actors to account, which is why, Mr. Speaker, we've taken legal actions against GC Strategies. We've referred cases to the RCMP. We will always protect the integrity of our procurement process.
The Honourable Member for Prince George, Peace River, Northern Rockies.
That answer doesn't cut it for Canadians struggling to pay their bills in record numbers. These old Liberals have turned ArriveCan into a masterclass in rewarding failure and corruption. The old ministers responsible for this scam are the same old ministers sitting over there as cabinet ministers right now. These same old ministers are ignoring the rules, allowing their insiders to get rich with taxpayers' hard-earned money. Why do corrupt Liberal ministers keep getting promoted and Canadians keep getting the bill?
That's a good question. The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me be absolutely clear. We will never tolerate misconduct from our suppliers or their subcontractors, which is why we've taken legal action against GC Strategies. We've referred cases to the RCMP. We've barred them from contracting with the Canadian government. We've revoked their security clearance, Mr. Speaker. This is the mandate we've been elected on to make sure that we have the best-in-class procurement system in this country. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, in British Columbia, an offender was recently sentenced to house arrest for possessing child sexual abuse and exploitation material. Mr. Speaker, the victims of such deplorable materials are living a psychological life sentence. Now, who do I blame for this? Not the judge, not the prosecutor, not the defense lawyer. I blame weak Liberal laws that allow people like this to serve their sentence on the couch. Will this public safety minister recognize this injustice and stop allowing house arrest for people who watch sexual abuse of children?
The Honourable Minister of Justice and
Put some W's down in
Attorney
chat
General.
around,
Mr. Speaker, let me condemn in the harshest possible terms sexual crimes committed against children. As a former prosecutor, I'm sure my honourable colleague would know that the law on the books today actually holds a mandatory minimum penalty of 1 year imprisonment for these types of heinous crimes. Mr. Speaker, I hope that this does not become a bipartisan issue. We want to work together to implement reforms not only to punish heinous crimes, but to prevent these harms from becoming a lifetime problem for vulnerable children.
The Honourable Member for Okanagan Lake
Prison is the
South
answer.
Kelowna.
Mr. Speaker, despite having world-class shipbuilders like
my
C-SPAN in
goodness, dude, the
Vancouver,
Liberals are
BC Ferries has
insane.
chosen a Chinese state-owned enterprise to build 4 new ships, even though the Prime Minister has declared China the biggest security threat to Canada. Meanwhile, the Liberals are providing BC Ferries with $36 million with no conditions to protect Canadian workers. Will the minister grow a spine of Canadian manufactured steel and make Canadian jobs a requirement for this funding, or will she side with Premier Eby in selling out our ship and steel building industries?
The Honourable Minister of Transport and Internal Trade.
Mr. Speaker, our government will always side with Canadian workers, particularly our steel and aluminum sectors that are being battered right now. I was disappointed and concerned when I learned of this procurement, particularly at this moment when Canadian workers need our support. BC Ferries is entirely under provincial jurisdiction. The support BC Ferries receives from Transport Canada is entirely for operations and there is no capital expenditure.
Liberal consultants are getting millions in contracts without the required security clearances or experience. Worse, they don't even have to do any work. The Auditor General found evidence that nearly half of government contracts were paid but not actually completed. While Liberal insiders get rich, Canadian families struggle to pay for food. In true Liberal fashion, of course, the ministers responsible have been promoted by this Prime Minister. So when will this government support today's Conservative motion to ensure that Canadians get their money back?
The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation.
Would be nice if they
Much,
deemed
Mr.
it
Speaker,
illegal
and I want to thank
or
the Auditor
wrong.
General for her
We should
report.
get the money
We've
returned.
already acted on
That's
previous recommendations
pretty
she's
common
put forward.
sense.
We've taken legal action against GC Strategies. We've referred cases to the RCMP because we will never tolerate bad behavior from our suppliers or their contractors. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable for the Lakes.
Speaker, it's clear the Prime Minister has the backs of Liberal insiders and backroom cronies, not hard-working Canadians. It's business as usual for this Prime Minister, who has no plans to cut the gravy train to Liberal consultants, which have no intention to actually complete work. While the RCMP investigate fraud on Canadians, those ministers responsible, they get a pat on the back and they get promoted. Will the Prime Minister today impose a lifetime ban on the founders of GC Strategies and all aligned entities and individuals, and of course, get Canadians their money back?
The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As I've highlighted in previous answers, we will always protect the integrity of our procurement process, which is why we've put in place the Office of Supplier Integrity, which has banned GC Strategies for 7 years. We've revoked their security clearance. We've taken legal actions against GC Strategies. We've referred cases to the RCMP because we'll never tolerate bad actions from suppliers or their contractors. But when he talks about having the backs of Canadians, Mr. Speaker, they have an opportunity to support a tax cut for 22 million Canadians right after question period. Hopefully they'll do it for a change. Thank you.
Member for Newtecumseh, Gwillimbury.
Mr. Speaker, the Liberal government ignored procurement rules, accountability, and basic common sense to funnel sweetheart contracts to their friends at GC Strategies, the ones who were behind ArriveCan. They handed out an eye-watering $64 million in taxpayer money to these Liberal insiders with no evidence that any work was actually completed. Will the Liberals take responsibility, show respect to Canadian taxpayers, and get the money back?
The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation.
Mr. Speaker, I think I've made it abundantly clear in previous answers that we will always protect the integrity of our procurement process, which is why we've taken legal actions against GC Strategies. We've referred cases to the RCMP. And, Mr. Speaker, we will always hold bad actors to account. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Newtecumseh, Gwillimbury.
Mr. Speaker, that answer wouldn't take the scum off rice pudding. The report from the Auditor General was clear. No work was done. The only thing delivered was a check to Liberal insiders. Despite an RCMP investigation and 64 million wasted, the cabinet ministers responsible weren't fired, they were promoted. New titles, bigger offices, all courtesy of this Prime Minister. Talk about failing upwards. Why is it that under this Liberal government, failure is rewarded and Canadian taxpayers get stuck with the bill?
The Honourable Minister of Government Transformation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And as I've noted before, we will always defend the integrity of our procurement process. We will never tolerate any form of misconduct from our suppliers or their contractors, which is why we've revoked GC Strategies security clearance. We've terminated all contracts more than a year ago. Now the Office of Supplier Integrity has barred them from contracting with the Canadian government. We've referred cases to the RCMP. We've taken legal actions. Why, Mr. Speaker? Because we will always hold bad actors responsible. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Member for Quebec-Mactaquac.
What a complete and totally comprehensive non-answer that was. Earlier this week, the Auditor General released their scathing audit stating that the GC Strategies was paid $64 million for the ArriveCan app with little to no evidence of any work having been completed. The Auditor General made note that this is just one example of a likely widespread issue. Mr. Speaker, there may be a new Prime Minister, but it's the same old Liberal government. Will the Prime Minister stand up today, vote for our Conservative motion to return this money to hard-working Canadian taxpayers, yes or no?
Yeah. The Honourable Minister
There you go. Put some dummies in the chat for that, huh?
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Auditor General for her work and note that we've acted on all the recommendations that she's put forward in the past, but we didn't stop there. We ended all contracts with GC Strategies over a year ago. We've taken away their security clearance. We've taken legal action against GC Strategies. We've referred cases to the RCMP. Why? Well, it's simple, because we will always defend the integrity of our procurement system, and we will always hold bad actors and their contractors accountable.
Mr. Speaker, there are questions on the Public Safety Minister's recent recusals. Was the Ethics Commissioner consulted prior to the Public Safety Minister setting up an internal conflict screen? And can the Prime Minister explain to this House why the Minister has recused himself?
The Honourable Minister of Public Safety.
Mr. Speaker, in all national security decisions, my utmost concern is that of the safety of Canadians. I will support law enforcement and national security agencies who do their work impartially and effectively in an abundance of caution and to ensure that there is no perception of any conflict. I've asked the public safety officials to implement a screen on national security issues relating to the Tamil community.
Now we're going to take a look at another video. Why Trump says everything is an emergency in terms of protests tariffs, and the borders. This is the CBC segment called About That. I usually like their breakdowns, and we're going to comment on it as it goes along.
Donald Trump does a lot of things he's not ordinarily supposed to do.
The U.S. president has called up members of the California National Guard.
We are getting news from multiple U.S. agencies that about 700 U.S. Marines have been mobilized.
And by that I mean the law, by default, and this has been true for 150 years, it simply doesn't allow for it. Trump cannot deploy the military to put down civil unrest unless what's happening in California, for example, isn't just protest, but rebellion, maybe even insurrection.
President, what do you think about the Insurrection Act to deal with the situation in California?
If there's an insurrection, I would certainly invoke it. We'll see.
And it's not just California. Trump's read of the entire country right now is that it is besieged by a staggering range of national emergencies: a border emergency, a drug emergency, an energy emergency, a trade emergency, and that the U.S. is under constant threat of war and invasion.
As Commander-in-Chief, I have no higher responsibility than to defend our country from threats and invasions, and that is exactly what I am going to do.
Now look, admittedly, some of this is just for dramatic effect, like that time in April when Trump fought back against the Obama-Biden war on showers. But some of it is actual legal justification, like when Trump deported alleged gang members to El Salvador without the usual due process by accusing them of being terrorists carrying out a literal invasion of the United States.
They emptied jails out, other nations emptied their jails into the United States. That's an invasion.
It begs the question whether Trump is presiding over a kind of permanent emergency government, bypassing Congress and ruling by executive order with largely undefined, meaning near limitless, power. Let's start in LA.
You know what's kind of funny is the fact that people who supported the Emergencies Act being invoked on the Freedom Convoy in Canada don't support what Trump is doing in LA. I don't know how else to spell it out, but it's kind of funny when you think about it in that context, isn't it? I mean, this is an actual insurrection that's happening, that's taking place. And it does require police force because there's people that are burning cars down. There's people that are blocking the freeways. It's not a controlled, it's not a pre-authorized protest. The convoy had literally the city's approval to be there. Like the police said, come and park here. This is where you have your permit for this protest. And with the LA protest, that's not the case at all. It's like just total anarchy. And liberals and Democrats are going, I think Trump is overreaching. But then also those same people supported Trudeau and the Liberal government in Canada invoking the Emergencies Act. It's just so backwards. It's so hilariously hypocritical, right? When you point it out like that. Anyways.
Unilaterally call the National Guard into any state in any numbers, but only if the threat constitutes a rebellion against the U.S. government or otherwise prevents the president from executing laws. Now, that's a high bar to reach, rebellion against the U.S. government. But the way the Trump administration sees it and what it says justifies sending in the military, numerous incidents of violence continue in response to personnel who are performing federal functions. And here's the key part. To the extent that protests or acts of violence directly inhibit the execution of the laws, they constitute a form of rebellion against the authority of the government of the United States. Okay, but let's ask another question. If this is open rebellion against the U.S. government, what isn't?
Rebellion, again, to me, always implies some sort of armed, organized effort to not just criticize the government, but literally trying to overthrow the democratically elected government of the United States. It would be a very dangerous thing to characterize basically these protests as rebellions, because it's tough to imagine the protests that wouldn't.
That's what democracy is all about. There has to be room for that. So the question is, where do you draw the line between people engaging in good democratic protests on the one hand and speaking their minds, and on the other hand, getting in the way of government doing what government is supposed to do?
And this question, is this really an emergency that warrants the use of emergency powers? It is the kind of question I hear being asked more and more.
First, I will declare a national emergency at our southern border.
On day one of Trump's second term, he would declare a national emergency at the U.S.-Mexico border, saying the influx of illegal migrants threatened America's sovereignty. This, despite the fact that for the better part of a year, the number of border apprehensions had already been steadily decreasing. But this allowed Trump to substantially increase manpower and resources deployed there.
I will also declare a national energy emergency.
That same day,
Trump just isn't messing around, like, at all, which is kind of refreshing to see. And this is honestly what Americans voted for. I don't think Canada could vote for this. I don't think Canada, in the just general speaking terms, I think Canada's a little too progressive to vote for something like this. But again, it's pretty cool to see a leader actually care about the country that he's leading.
Day, another executive order declaring a national energy emergency, allowing him to fast-track oil and mineral production. He blamed Biden for a deteriorating situation that required immediate remedy, and which a lawsuit accuses Trump of doing so he can bypass environmental protection laws. Another day one priority, a sudden decision that drug cartels constitute an unusual and extraordinary threat, and so I hereby declare a national emergency. This cleared the way for Trump to brand certain gangs as foreign terrorist organizations, which would set the stage for the deportations we would see a couple of months later. Trump would also, very abruptly, come to see Canada as a national security threat, targeting the flow of fentanyl across the border. He invoked the National Emergencies Act to justify punitive tariffs.
Yeah, I mean... Canada's very loosey-goosey. At least we were. I don't know if we're tightening up under the Liberals, under Carney. I would like to think that we are, but realistically, we're probably not. And Canada, we all know, I know, we all know we're a security threat to our neighbors in America. I mean, our immigration system is so flawed. People can pretend to be part of LGBT whatever, and they can just seek asylum in this country. Like, that's insane. You just put on a little feminine voice and a lisp, and all of a sudden now you're a Canadian. Like, what is going on? It's crazy what's going on.
Despite the truth of the matter, which was that Canada is estimated by U.S. officials themselves to be responsible for only a tiny fraction of all incoming fentanyl, less than 1%. And all those Liberation Day reciprocal tariffs imposed on account of trade deficits the U.S. has with many countries around the world. Once again, this familiar language, an unusual and extraordinary threat, and I hereby declare a national emergency. It didn't seem to be an important factor in Trump's declaration that the U.S. has had trade deficits with many countries for decades. That's what happens when your citizens have more purchasing power than just about everybody else. But suddenly calling it an emergency is the legal basis for being able to impose, without any congressional involvement at all, sweeping tariffs on nearly every single country on planet Earth.
So tariffs are supposed to be the domain of Congress. They're not supposed to belong to the White House and the president. The only way the president is allowed to take control of tariffs are through these emergency measures that were granted to him by Congress.
The fact of the matter is, over the years, Congress has passed all sorts of laws authorizing all sorts of actions in response to all sorts of emergencies, give or take, so a creative and determined president can find some statutory warrant for doing just about whatever he wants to do.
And I should point out, I've only mentioned so far a very small number of all the times Trump has invoked emergency powers as a means of getting things done with as little discussion and oversight as possible. Journalists.
Yeah. I mean, the majority of Americans actually agree that these are emergencies worthy of the powers that Trump is using. I mean, CBC can bitch and complain all they want, and Canadian liberals can bitch and complain all they want. Americans see this as valid, and they're happy that Trump is taking action. So it's kind of a, as Joey Tribbiani says, it's a moot point. It's a cow's opinion at this point.
At the Associated Press have tracked how often past presidents have cited the National Emergencies Act and the International Emergency Economic Powers Act over the course of their terms. Here's George W. Bush's first term. And keep in mind, he was president during the 9/11 attack. Here's his second term. Barack Obama's first term looks like this, explained in part because he presided over the worst economic disaster since the Great Depression, and here is his second term. And then here's Trump's first term and Biden's only term. Layer them all on top of each other and you start to notice a trend. But then look at the first few months of Trump's second term. This is why I've seen some media call this the 911 presidency, where the use of emergency powers has become central to governing.
What we're seeing with Trump and this continual declaration of emergency after emergency is just an ongoing increase of presidential power with very little interest from
you're trying to reverse engineer. You're trying to say that he's using his powers too often, but you're totally negating the fact that the powers are worthy of being used in the first place.
Other branches in checking that power.
This is of a piece with what many folks see as a slide in America's democratic standings.
Now, I don't want to leave you with the impression that Trump is the only president who has ever stretched the definition of an emergency. You may remember, for example, when Joe Biden tried to cancel more than $400 billion worth of federal student debt using the COVID national emergency that was already in place as justification. The U.S. Supreme Court would later decide you can't do that. But most experts agree Trump has taken this approach to a whole new level.
Other presidents have, invoked emergency authority, sometimes in circumstances where there was a lot of dispute as to whether there was an actual emergency or not. What I think sets Trump apart is that is where he starts. He starts with, these things are emergencies, therefore extraordinary use of my powers as president are justified and necessary.
Now, Trump's administration has said on many occasions now,
the president was right to declare a national emergency when it came to fentanyl and when it came to our crippling deficits and the lack of critical supply chains here at home.
It drives home, how much of a national emergency we're in, that we've lost critical skills, and we weren't even aware that we had lost those skills until a few months ago.
But what actually constitutes an emergency? How do you define one?
Riots in the streets,
That's not really
chaos,
laid out
vandalism, looting.
When you look at the statutes, it doesn't really define clearly what a threat to national security is. And so the president has all the power to decide what exactly that means.
I think when these laws were being written, Congress was expecting that future presidents would use these powers carefully and solemnly. If Spain decides to invade Florida, we want the president to be able to react quickly, and we don't want to tie his hands with lots of procedures and process and that sort of thing.
So here's the bottom line. There is no shortage of opinionated people out there who believe this is part of a rapid descent into authoritarianism, the erosion of American democracy, a sign of dark times ahead. Or, for Trump's most vocal supporters, this is simply a man who has identified a series of problems and is getting things done. But one thing has been made clear. Until a court or Congress decides to rein in this unchecked power, an emergency is really only one thing. It's what the president says it is, whether that's Trump or whomever comes after.
Yeah, I mean, that's objectively a true statement, but in this case, it's very misleading and disingenuous to not consider the fact that these riots in LA are actual emergencies. And this is what's wrong with the woke left. They're taking a very clear example of a time where using emergency powers in America is actually warranted. And they're going, well, if it happens now, it could happen whenever else. Like, yeah, for emergencies, dude. If Trump literally wanted to use the military to take over the public, he would have done it by now. That's insane. The guy is like one of the most patriotic Americans. Literally took a bullet for the country and then became president. I mean, give me a freaking break. Anyways, the woke left never ceases to amaze me at how ridiculous and woke they actually freaking are. And I'd love to know your guys' thoughts and comments down below about this. Do you think that Trump is a crazy big threat to using emergency powers? Or do you think that the powers are actually warranted of being used? Let me know.